Before the first humans, before the islands had their names, there was only the sea.
From the land, a new pioneer returned to the water. A mammal, beginning the long
Sunlit. Over millions of years, the legs became flippers. The body became a torpedo. They had returned to the ocean.
Their story begins in a lost ocean, the great, warm Tethys Sea, a tropical paradise that once circled the globe. And in these warm waters, a new kind of seal was born. Not a creature of the ice, but of the sun. As the continents continued their slow dance, a new sea was born, the Caribbean. And they found a paradise, an ocean basin, rich with food and free of competitors. And so, they thrived. For millions of years, they were the undisputed kings of this new sea. They had become true children of the sun. A seal that did not fear the heat, but embraced it. They were no longer explorers. They were home. A new and unique lineage of seals.
But the shifting of the continents that had created their new home would also divide their family forever.
Three separate seas, three separate destinies. From that one ancient family came the three modern monk seals.
But the Caribbean seal was different. While its cousins often sought the shadows of caves, it was a creature of the openness, and it possessed a trait that would define its destiny: a profound lack of fear. It was a gentle, a creature of the sun with a gentle heart, a unique branch of the monk seal family. The seal's new home was a unique place on Earth, not a deep, open ocean, but a shallow sea.
And through this maze flowed the great currents, a constant river of warm, clear water.
And in these warm, sunlit shallows, the greatest builders on Earth began their work: the corals. And this city became home to a staggering diversity of life, a bustling metropolis of fish, the warm currents, the shallow sea, the rich coral reefs. All the pieces were in place. It was And we know this ancient story not from legend, but from the earth itself, from the echoes in stone. Every bone tells a story of the size of the animal, the power of its bite, and its close family ties to the other monk seals of the world. The fossils show a lineage that reigned in these waters for at least 2 million years. A long influence. Their stony echoes have been found all across the region, from the coasts of Florida to the ancient reefs of the Bahamas.
A story, written not in ink, but in bone. The undeniable proof of a great
But the shifting of the continents that had created their new home would also divide their family forever. 3 separate seas, 3 separate destinies. From that one ancient family came the Thasits. But the Caribbean seal was different. While its cousins often sought the shadows of caves, it was a creature of the open sun, and it possessed a trait that would define its destiny: a profound lack of fear. It was a gentle, curious...
A creature of the sun, with a gentle heart. A unique branch of the monk seal family, perfectly adapted to its Caribbean paradise.
To thrive in this world of reefs and open water required a perfect engine. And the seal's engine was its powerful flippers. It was a transformation millions of years in the making. The bones that once supported a life on land, and this perfected design unlocked the entire vertical world of the reef. The power to leave the world of air by intelligence. In the deep caves and crevices of the reef, this gave it an unmatched advantage. It was faster, more agile, and a body perfected by millions of years of natural selection. It was a creature in complete command of its underwater.
And in these warm, sunlit shallows, the greatest builders on Earth began their work.
And this city became home to a staggering diversity of life. A bustling metropolis of fish, turtles, the warm currents, the shallow sea, the rich coral reefs. All the pieces were in place. And we know this ancient story not from legend, but from the earth itself, from the echoes in stone. Every bone tells a story of the size of the animal, the power of its bite, and its close family ties to giants. This was its kingdom and its pantry, a world of endless corridors and hidden caves, teeming with fish were the staple of its diet. Its powerful, streamlined body was a perfect engine for chasing down even the swiftest swimmers of the reef. But it also hunted the cleverest creatures of the reef. It would use its sensitive whiskers to find the hidden octopus, and for the armored prey, it had its own set of tools. Using the powerful claws on its flippers to dig and pry, no crevice was safe. And for the armored prey, it had its own set of tools. Using the powerful claws on its flippers to dig and pry, no crevice was safe.
Fast, strong, and intelligent. In this vibrant world, the Caribbean monk seal was the apex predator.
Sightings. And what a kingdom it was. A world of impossible beauty. The pristine Caribbean.
It was a land of staggering abundance. The reefs were so healthy, the fish so numerous, and crucially, it was a world without land predators. The islands were a true sanctuary, a place with no fear, abundant food in the water, and perfect safety on the land. It was a world in perfect balance.
A perfect world. A timeless paradise. An ancient harmony. On the very brink.
And then, a new creature arrived in this paradise. The first people. Skilled navigators.
And here, they met the king of the reef. And the first encounter was not one of violence, but of music.
For thousands of years, they shared this world. The people of the sea and the seals of the sea.
But in the late 15th century, a new kind of ship appeared on the horizon. A ship that would bring with it.
And the lost jewel of the Caribbean rested, completely unaware that its world was about to be changed forever.
And this is what that long, ancient story created. The final, perfect product.
A creature perfectly at home in a world of sun and sand. Its signature pose, a portrait of peace. But in the water, it was transformed. The clumsy creature of the land became a dancer of impossibles. And in its gaze, there was no fear, only a gentle and profound curiosity. A soul.
This was the world that was lost. And this was the creature. The gentle.
This was their kingdom. A world of turquoise water and sun-drenched sand. And with the dawn,
and as the sun warmed the sand, the seals would come ashore, hauling their great bodies out of the cool water.
Here, they were completely at peace. In this world without land predators, there was no need for fear. Only the sun. They were deeply social creatures. Even in rest, they sought contact, reinforcing the bonds that held their peaceful society together. A sun-drenched kingdom and a peaceful reign. This was the daily life of the lost jewel of the Caribbean. And in the heart of these island kingdoms were the nurseries, the shallow, turquoise lagoons, a safe. And the nurseries were filled with life. The seal pups, born with a coat of black fur, spent and the mother's care was constant. A gentle touch, a watchful eye, a bond of. The males kept their distance, but they were the silent guardians of the nursery, patrolling the reef edges and watching for any sign of danger from the deep. This was a healthy colony. The watchful males, the nurturing mothers, and the playful young. But a paradise must be sustained by work. The adult males were the great hunters, patrolling the edge.
And then, the chase. A burst of incredible speed and agility. A high-speed pursuit through the three-dimensional maze of the Coral City.
Success. A meal, won by speed and skill. The energy that would be brought back to sustain the life of the colony. It was a body born for the water. the front flippers like wings for steering with delicate precision. A body perfected by millions of years of natural selection. It was a creature in complete command of its own. But a paradise must be sustained by work. The adult males were the great hunters.
Then, a sign, a distant flash of silver, a school of fish.
His patrol was also a watch, a constant vigil to protect the colony from the dangers of the deeper ocean. The males communicated with a quiet respect, a simple signal to acknowledge a neighbor, a shared understanding in a world without conflict.
Provider and protector. This was the role of the adult male. The quiet, watchful king of this tropical paradise.
The hunt begins with a dive, a single breath, and a graceful plunge into the vertical world of the reef.
And then, the chase. A burst of incredible speed and agility. A high-speed pursuit through the three-dimensional maze of the coral city.
Success, a meal, won by speed and skill. The energy that would be brought back to sustain the life of the colony. It was a body born for the water. The front flippers like wings for steering with delicate precision. A body perfected by millions of years of natural selection. It was a creature in complete command of its underwater. It was a body born for the water. The front flippers like wings for steering with delicate precision. Its movement was a form of art, a silent underwater ballet, a dance of pure grace. And this grace had a purpose. It allowed the seal to navigate the intricate labyrinth of the reef with a skill that was unmatched. But its grace was backed by immense power. A single, powerful stroke of its hind flippers could propel it through the water with breathtaking speed. Grace and power, agility and speed. It was a complete master of the tides, a creature but the reef was not the seals alone. It was a bustling city, and the seal shared its home with a rich community of neighbors. It shared the currents with the ancient sea turtles, two gentle giants moving in a state of quiet, peaceful coexistence. It was an intelligent and opportunistic hunter. It learned to follow the stingrays, knowing that their search for food would omits. And there were moments of incredible trust. The seal would visit cleaning stations, allowing the tiny cleaner fish and status. As the sun climbed to its highest point, the island would fall into a deep and sleepy stillness. And the seals would seek out the mangroves, a shady sanctuary, a cool and quiet world, protected from the harshness of the sun. Here, they would pass the hottest hours of the day. A long, peaceful siesta in the cool, a time for the young to rest and grow, safe and secure under the watchful eye of the colony. This was the rhythm of the heat. A time of quiet and stillness, a necessary pause.
And as the pups grow, their most important lessons begin. They are creatures of the sea, but the art of swimming must be taught.
The first plunge is a clumsy affair. The grace of the adult is not yet present. It is but with each passing day, the clumsiness gives way to confidence. The ancient instincts awaken. The pup begins to find its rhythm in the water. And with confidence in the water comes the next lesson, the hunt. A first, playful dive in pursuit of its first meal. The lesson is complete. The student has become a swimmer. The mother's work is done, and a new master of the reef is born. But the swiftest fish were not the only meal on the reef. In the dark and winding corridors of the coral labyrinth, octopus, a master of disguise and one of the most intelligent minds in the sea. To hunt, it required more than speed, it required cunning. And the seal had its own secret weapon. Its whiskers, as sensitive as fingertips, could read the story of the reef by touch.
A battle of wits, won by the seal. A testament to the intelligence that lay behind his gentle eyes.
It was a hunter that thought, a creature of intelligence and curiosity, not just brute force. But life was not all hunting and survival. At its heart, the Caribbean monk seal was a deeply social creature. Their language was often one of touch, a gentle nuzzle, a soft greeting. a way of reinforcing, and they had a voice, a language of soft barks and gentle grunts, a constant, quiet conversation that flowed through the colony. And for the young, the society was a playground, a place to learn the rules of their world through the universal language of play. This was their society, not one of aggression or rigid hierarchy, but one of gentle tolerance and peace. And so they lived, in their thousands, scattered across the empty cays and sand spits of a pristine sea. A life of two halves, the patient, hard work of the hunt in the cool of the water, and the long, peaceful hours of rest in the warmth of the sun. It was a gentle society, built on touch and tolerance. A community of quiet neighbors, living in a rare and beautiful harmony. It was a creature in a state of perfect grace. A life of peace and plenty, in a world that seemed made for it.
The end of a perfect day, in a perfect paradise. A peace that felt as if it would last forever.
Vestals. The life of the islands is governed by ancient rhythms. The slow, powerful breath of the tide.
And the seals lived their lives by this rhythm. Following the water's edge, their daily movements were a dance, choreographed by the tide.
And the night had its own rhythm, painted in the silver light of the moon. A time of quiet and profound peace. The night was a time for hunting, a silent pursuit through a world of silver and shadow, a dance between the hunter and the moon.
Sun and moon, ebb and flow, hunt and rest.
But their rhythm was not confined to a single island. They were great travelers, moving across the vast expanse of the Caribbean Sea. They would undertake journeys of hundreds of miles across the open water, from the Bahamas to the shores of the Yucatan. And they were clever travelers. They understood the great ocean currents and would use these invisible rivers to carry them between the islands. For the currents were also a river of food. They concentrated the small fish that the seals fed upon, a traveling feast that sustained them on their journey. And so, it was a creature of the entire Caribbean. A great wanderer, perfectly in tune. But the rhythm of the islands was not just the daily tide. It was the great ocean currents. The seals were clever travelers. They understood these invisible rivers and would ride them for hundreds of miles. For the currents were also a river of food. They concentrated the small fish that the seals fed upon, a traveling feast that sustained them on their journey. And so, it was a creature of the entire Caribbean. A great wanderer, perfectly in tune. A rhythm, not of days, but of seasons. An ancient, unbroken pattern of travel that held their world together. But this paradise had a violent side. The calm could be shattered in an instant by the fury of a tropical storm.
But the seals were children of the sea, and they did not fear its anger. They would ride out the great storm.
And after the fury, a great calm. The storm passes, leaving the world washed. They were true masters of the sea, in both its calm and its fury. They were true masters of the sea, in both its calm and its fury. An ancient lineage, persons. But the seal was not the only king of this domain. The reefs were also home to an older, more efficient predator. It was a relationship built on mutual respect. The healthy adult seal was a powerful animal in its own right. But the young and the weak were vulnerable. This is the harsh logic of the reef. The sharks were a vital force. And so, the two kings of the reef kept each other in balance. A timeless, perfect dance.
An ancient dance of respect and power. The way it was meant to be.
The abundance of the Caribbean was a feast for all. And when the great schools of baitfish gathered, the seabirds learned to watch the seals. The presence of the great hunters below was a clear signal that a meal was near the surface.
It was an unwitting partnership. The seals, hunting in the deep, would drive the fish to the surface, and the birds would be waiting.
And after the hunt, they would share the shore. A peaceful truce between the masters of the sea and the masters of the air. This was the true rhythm of the islands. A world not of constant conflict, but of a deep and profound. And the rhythm of the islands was also a rhythm of seasons. Once a year, the scattered from quiet beaches, the great rookery becomes a bustling city of seals, teeming with new life.
And it was here, in the safety of the great gathering, that the new generation was born.
And as the young grew stronger, it was time for their first journey. A first, long swim. This was the great rhythm of renewal. A seasonal gathering that ensured the continuation of the species. And as the young grew stronger, it was time for their first journey. A first, long swim across the dance. And there were other, deeper magics in these waters. Once a year, cued by the moon, the regents. This was the great annual feast, a massive pulse of energy into the food web, providing a sea of stars come to life for a single night. Another of the profound and beautiful rhythms. A sea of stars come to life for a single night. Another of the profound and beautiful rhythms that is. But the rhythms of the island were tied not just to the sun, but to the moon. And once a year, the full moon. It is one of nature's greatest marvels. The reef itself, reproducing. This was the great annual feast, a massive pulse of energy into the food web, providing a vital source.
A sea of stars come to life for a single night. Another of the profound and beautiful rhythm.
This was the great rhythm of renewal, a seasonal gathering that ensured the continuation of the.
And with the dawn, another rhythm, the departure of the hunters, leaving the safety of the colony.
A daily commute across a kingdom of coral and turquoise. A purposeful journey to the places of plenty. They had their favored places, the outer reefs, where the schools of fish gathered, a reliable and abundant source of food. And with the setting sun, they would return. A successful day's work, bringing the bounty of the reef back to the colony. Departure and return, hunt and rest. This was the unbroken rhythm of their life. From the sky, the true scale and complexity of their kingdom is revealed. A maze of turquoise sunlights, and through these channels the seals would travel. Dark, graceful shapes, threading their way through the shallow softness. These highways were shared by all the great travelers of the reef. The seals would often share their path with the
a world of deep ocean, shallow reef, and sun-baked sand, all woven together by a million. And at the end of the day, a final rhythm. The turning of the earth, revealing a universe of impossible beauty.
Silence. And under the stars, the great harmony continued. The reef, the fish, and the mammals, all at peace.
A creature, born from the ancient rhythms of the sea, and living a life in purpose.
A harmony of reef, fish, and mammals under the starlit Caribbean sky. A peace that
the end of a perfect day in a perfect paradise. An unbroken harmony that felt as if it would last forever.
For millions of years, the seal's paradise was its own. But then, a new creature arrived, and here they met the king of the reef. And the first encounter was not one of violence, but of mutual. For thousands of years, they shared this world, the people of the sea and the seals of the sea.
But in the late 15th century, a new kind of ship appeared on the horizon. A ship that would bring with it.
And the lost jewel of the Caribbean rested, completely unaware that its world was about to be changed forever. They came from a world of steel and gunpowder, and they saw this new paradise not as a world to join. And in the journals of the very first explorers, the seals make their first appearance in recorded history.
The first attempts to capture their image were a mix of scientific observation and artistic license.
And what amazed the explorers most was the creature's incredible tameness. It showed no fear. A lifetime in a world they would approach the ships, their natural curiosity overriding any sense of danger. A fatal and tragic mistake. And so it began. The first recorded hunt in 1494. The sailors needing to resupply.
The sailors wrote of it in their journals. They were astonished. The sea wolves did not fight back. They did not even flee.
And soon, they were hunted not just for meat, but for their oil, their thick layer of blubber, a perfect. And as the centuries passed, the human world grew. Settlements, plantations, and ports expanded.
Even then, some observers began to sound the alarm. Naturalists who noted that the once great colonies were shrinking.
The first attempts to capture their image were a mix of scientific observation and artistic license.
And what amazed the early observers most was its profound curiosity. It showed no fear, only a gentle interest in the new arrivals.
These first, precious images are all that remain. The only visual records of a creature.
The artists captured a truth that would seal their fate. They were a creature of profound peace, with no concept of the violence that was coming.
These are more than just sketches. They are a witness, our only window into a world.
Patience. And what amazed the explorers most was the creature's incredible tameness. It showed no fear. A lifetime in a world they would approach the ships, their natural curiosity overriding any sense of danger. A fatal and tragic mistake. They would greet the sailors in the shallows, their gentle nature a strange and wondrous sight to men from a harsher, more violent world.
And so, for a brief moment in history, there was a time of wonder. A time of
It was a trust that would be fatally betrayed.
For thousands of years, the first people of the Caribbean shared their world with the seals. The relationship was not one of distances. The seals had learned that these humans meant them no harm. They would raise their young on the same beaches, their lives lived.
This was the way of the islands for thousands of years. A balance, a harmony, a world, an unbroken peace that had lasted for generations. A peace that was about to be shattered forever.
The children of the village and the children of the sea would share the same shallow lagoons. A playground for two.
But the age of wonder was short-lived. The long, difficult ocean voyages took their toll.
And so it began. The first recorded hunt in 1494. The sailors needing to resupply.
The beach, once a sanctuary of peace, was turned into a butcher's yard. The living jewels of the Caribbean.
And a pattern was set. For the next 200 years, the defenseless seal colonies became a routine. The long peace was over. The era of gentle observation had been replaced by an era of brutal exploitation. And in their tales around the campfire, they spoke of it with astonishment. The sea wolves did not fight back.
And soon they were hunted not just for meat, but for their oil, their thick layer of blubber.
Bombers. Even then, some observers began to sound the alarm. Naturalists who noted that the once great colonies were shrinking.
The world had been changed. The long peace between man and seal was over. The age of wonder had ended.
But the world was changing. The growing cities and industries of Europe and the Americas had a new. And so, the gentle seal of the Caribbean became a target. Hunted now not for food, the life of a seal, rendered down and packed into a barrel. It was a currency, a commodity that fueled. It became a ruthlessly efficient trade, a cycle of arrival, slaughter, and departure.
And where the great colonies had once thrived, there was now only silence. The hunt for oil was... And as the centuries passed, the human world grew. Settlements, plantations, and ports exist. The quiet beaches were no longer quiet. Their ancient sanctuaries were gone. For the shy and gentle... It was not just the beaches they lost. The mangroves that gave them shade were cleared. The wetlands. And so their world shrank. Year by year, island by island, their vast kingdom was reduced to a few. It had become a refugee in its own home, pushed to the very edges of its world, with nowhere left to run. Even then, some observers began to sound the alarm. Naturalists who noted that the once great colonies were shrinking, they wrote of their concerns, publishing their observations. But these were voices in the wilderness. The world was not yet ready to listen.
The great machine of commerce and progress rolled on, and the quiet warnings of a few naturalists were...
And so, while the world looked the other way, the silent collapse continued. A free fall. The few who were watching understood. They were witnessing the end of an era, a premonition.
The world had been changed. The long peace between man and seal was over. The age of wonder had ended.
This was the world before the great change. A perfect harmony, a delicate...
But the world was growing smaller, and the age of quiet observation was over. The ships came. It was a collision of worlds. The ancient, gentle rhythm of the reef against the hard...
The shadow of the new world had fallen, and the long, peaceful dream of the Caribbean was over.
The age of exploitation began with a grim and silent ritual. Before the sun rose, they would land on the very beaches where the pups were born. A sanctuary, about to become a killing field. And even in the final moments, they did not flee. Their ancient innocence left them completely defenseless. They looked...
These gentle, non-aggressive seals, once abundant, met their end with the rising sun, their trust and their fatal mistake. And the sun would rise on a scene of utter devastation. A red dawn on a silent beach. The skins were salted and stacked, a grim monument to a morning's work. Piles of pelt, and the blubber was rendered down in great iron pots, a process that turned the clean sea air thick with the life of a seal, rendered down and packed into a barrel, a currency, a commodity that fueled the... This was the price of the harvest, a paradise turned into a wasteland. For the few that could escape the initial carnage on the beach, the only refuge was the sea, a desperate flight from a terror they could not understand. The pure waters of the Caribbean, stained with the blood of its gentlest inhabitants. A paradise, bleeding,
and the scent of death would draw a new crowd from the sky. The gulls, arriving in their thousands to feast on the remains. The sky, once darkened by the gentle seals on their morning bask, was now darkened by the scavengers.
This was the end of a colony. A process repeated on island after island, cay after...
The skins were salted and stacked, a grim monument to a morning's work. Piles of pelts,
and the barrels of oil, the true prize of the hunt, were loaded for their long journey. The wealth...
And it was not only the seals that were being harvested. The new commercial fisheries began to empty the reefs of the very fish.
And the new fishing industry left its own ghosts in the water. Lost nets that would continue to kill for decades. And on the land, the great sugar plantations demanded more and more space. The coastal wetlands. The hunt left behind its own grim monuments. Piles of pelts, salted and dried, each one a life. a creature that had basked in this same sun and swam in these finches. It was a practiced trade, with its own grim rituals. The skins were cured under the hot sun, prepared for their... And this was the final destination. A life, a silent testament to an industry built on the skin of a gentle creature.
And the barrels of oil, the true prize of the hunt, were loaded for their long journey. A journey of thousands of miles, carrying a cargo of liquid life. A direct line.
And this was its final purpose. The life of a creature of the sun was used to light the nights of a new...
And the demand was insatiable. The more the world grew, the more oil it needed. A cycle of consumption.
This was the true cost of a barrel of oil. A price paid not in gold.
And the assault was not only on the seals themselves. The new, efficient commercial fisheries began to empty the reaches. For the seals that survived the hunt, a new challenge arose. The once bountiful reefs were crisis, and the hunger of one generation was passed to the next. The starving mothers could not provide for their pups, and the new fishing industry left its own ghosts in the water, lost nets that would continue to kill for decades. The sea itself had become an enemy. The seals were now forced to navigate a world of stolen food and silent.
And the hunt was not the only danger. As the colonies grew, a great fishing industry was born.
And the new fishing industry left its own ghosts in the water, lost nets that would continue to kill for decades. And for a curious creature like the monk seal, the ghost nets were a fatal lure, a simple, tragic encounter from which there was no escape. This was a new kind of danger, not the clean, swift strike of a predator, but a slow, witless death in a man. And so the sea itself became a minefield. The greatest dangers were now the ones that were silent, invisible, and left behind.
Sightings. And while the sea was being emptied, the land was being devoured by a new and powerful king. Sugar.
To feed the hunger for sugar, the coastal wetlands were drained. The mangrove forests, the vital nurseries,
and the destruction on the land bled into the sea. The runoff from the great plantations choked the reefs with sediment and poisons. And so, the king of the reef was left to rule over a kingdom of ruins. A world of dead coral. It was a cascade of failures, a perfect storm of greed and ignorance that attacked the seal from every possible direction.
And the numbers tell the story. A population that had survived for millions of years was driven to the very brink of extinction in less than...
Colony by colony, island by island, their lights went out. The vibrant, living map of their kingdom was becoming a world of ghosts.
A final, grim tally. A story of millions reduced almost nothing.
It was a fall from which there would be no return. The great dynasty of the Caribbean monk seal was over.
And by the late 1800s, the tone of the journals had changed. The wonder of discovery was replaced by...
But it was a plea that went unheeded. The value of a dead seal was still greater than the value of a living one. The warnings were ignored, but it was a plea that went unheeded. The value of a dead seal was still greater than the value of a living one. The warnings were ignored.
The few survivors fled to the most remote corners of the sea, seeking refuge on tine, barren reefs, where...
By the turn of the century, perhaps only one great colony remained, hidden away in the remote distance. As the 19th century drew to a close, the seal's world had shrunk to a few, scattered points of light.
The few survivors fled, a desperate journey to the edges of their world, a retreat from the relentless advance of the hunter.
But these last sanctuaries were poor substitutes for the paradise they had lost. The food was scarce, but even these last, most remote places could not offer permanent safety. Sooner or later, the hunters would find them. hunted from their paradise, and now hunted from their prisons. For the Caribbean monk seal, there was nowhere left on Earth to run. Essence. By the late 1800s, only a few strongholds remained. Remote, inaccessible reefs, where the
And it was here that science made its first formal assessment. The reports were grim. They confirmed what the...
But the scientific reports did not bring protection. They brought a map. The discovery of the... And with that final slaughter, the story of the Caribbean monk seal as a thriving species was over. The scientists recorded what they saw, and their reports became the species' obituary, a story written in the cold, hard numbers of extinction.
But the scientific reports did not bring protection. They brought a map. The discovery of the last great...
And with that final slaughter, the story of the Caribbean monk seal as a thriving species was over.
This was the price of progress. A world of ancient beauty, of gentle rhythms.
The world was now a quieter and a poorer place. A unique and gentle spirit had been extinguished. The great slaughter was over. And now, the long silence would begin.
The 19th century had ended. The great slaughter was over, for there was almost nothing left to hunt. And with the new century came a new technology, the camera. The first and last photograph.
They are ghosts in the grain. The last, faint visual echoes of a living species.
And in their eyes, a new expression. The gentle curiosity was gone, replaced by the wary. This was what a great colony of Caribbean monk seals looked like at the end. Not a thriving city.
By the 1920s, the seals were already a memory for most. A story told by the old fishermen.
The fishermen began to call them ghost seals. A fleeting glimpse in the distance, a shadow in the water. Spurred by these fleeting reports, scientific expeditions set out, a last, determined search for the Caribbean essence. But they found only a paradise of ghosts. The lagoons were empty, the beaches were silent, the great...
And with that generation, the last of the living memories began to fade.
By the late 1800s, only a few strongholds remained. Remote, inaccessible reefs. And it was here that science made its first formal assessment. The reports were grim.
But the scientific reports did not bring protection. They brought a map. The discovery of the last...
And with that final slaughter, the story of the Caribbean monk seal as a thriving species was over.
The scientists recorded what they saw, and their reports became the species' obituary, a story.
And as the 20th century opened up the underwater world to human exploration, the first divers into the Caribbean found a strange
seal. The reports that did trickle in were always of the same thing. A single, lone male. And in the final years, the ancient instincts would still call. But it was a call with no answer.
The final searches took to the sky. For weeks, scientists would scan the thousands of remote cays from the air. But their search found only silence. The great rookeries were empty. The beaches were bare.
The great colonies were gone. All that remained were scattered individuals. And in the final years, the ancient instincts would still call. But it was a call with no answer. He was a ghost on the sand. A memory of a species, still breathing, but already a part of the past.
The final searches were less like biological surveys at worms.
To be the last one. To carry the memory of 1,000,000 years and 1,000,000 voices.
The last hope for the species rested in the most isolated places on Earth. The hidden coves, the forgotten.
But biology has a cruel and final law. Below a certain number, a population cannot survive.
And in the final years, the ancient instincts would still call.
The perfect nurseries, the safe and secluded beaches, now lay empty. The cradle was ready, and with the failure of the last generation to meet, the last glimmer of hope for the Caribbean monk seal was extinguished.
The final searches took to the sky. For weeks, scientists would scan the thousands of remote cays from the air. But their search found only silence. The great rookeries were empty. The beaches were bare. The verticals. And as the 20th century opened up the underwater world to human exploration, the first divers into the Caribbean found a space. They found its gentle cousins, the manatees. They found the intelligent dolphins. They found a world
splitting. They found its gentle cousins, the manatees. They found the intelligent dolphins. They found a world still full of life, visions. And as the 20th century opened up the underwater world to human exploration, the first divers into the Caribbean found a strange.
They searched the last possible refuges, the deep, dark coral caves. But the hunter was gone.
Life remained, of course, but it was a different kind of life. The great, warm-blooded king had been replaced. The coral caves, once the larders of a king, were now just empty rooms. A silent, and so, the final underwater searches confirmed what was already known. The last echoes were gone.
By the 1950s, the seals were already a memory for most. A story told by the old fishermen.
The fishermen began to call them ghost seals. A fleeting glimpse in the distance, a shadow in the water.
And with that generation, the last of the living memories began to fade. The ghost itself.
By the late 1800s, only a few strongholds remained. Remote, inaccessible reefs.
The scientists recorded what they saw, and their reports became the species obituary, a story.
And then, the last, verified sighting. A remote and dangerous reef off the coast.
He did not know it, but he was the last of his kind, the last endling, the final.
And then, he slipped back into the water and disappeared, vanishing from sight.
For decades, scientists kept searching, hoping the species was just hiding. But the searches always ended in failure. The silence was permanent.
And so, the search ended. The last echo had faded, leaving only a great and final silence. The searches were the most extensive ever mounted. They combed the thousands of remote cays and reefs from. But their meticulous searches found only what the divers and fishermen already knew: an empty paradise.
The last verified sighting in 1952 sparked a new wave of interest. A new generation of.
The law finally offered its protection, a shield for a ghost. The Caribbean monk seal was officially declared endangered.
The last great search was over. The hope of finding a surviving colony. A final.
But in the decades that followed the last sighting, the world began to change. A new awareness was dawning. And this new awareness was written into law. The Endangered Species Act. A landmark promise sits. And so, in a final, tragic irony, the Caribbean monk seal was officially granted government protection. The plans were drawn. Sanctuaries were proposed. Recovery programs were designed. An entire conservation.
The last great search was over. The hope of finding a surviving colony. A final echo in some place.
And in the long years since the seal's disappearance, the reef lives on. At night, a new cast of bliss. The ancient hunters remain. The eel, the barracuda, and the shark. The cold-blooded kings who have put us. And with the great seal gone, the balance has shifted. The creatures it once hunted, like the lobster and the crab.
The reef lives on. It is still a world of breathtaking beauty and wonder. But it is and on the shore, there is only a profound and permanent silence. The great colonies are a distant memory. And so, the waves wash over the abandoned rookeries. The cradles of the voices are gone. The sounds of a thriving society, now just an echo on the wind. They have left no tracks in the sand, no sign that they were ever here. A final, gentle erasure by the tide. And for those who study the sea today, the Caribbean is a world of ghosts. This is the true meaning of extinction. Not just an absence, but an irreversible loss.
To lose a species like the Caribbean monk seal is to lose 1 million years of evolution. It's like a great library has burned down.
All of their secrets, their social bonds, their unique way of being in the world. All of that knowledge, perfected.
It leaves a hole in the world, a permanent void, a silence that speaks to our own failure.
And so, all that is left is the story, a lesson preserved in museums and in books.
A final, fading echo in a sea of ghosts.
The Caribbean has gone quiet.
It is a silence that will never be broken. An irreversible loss.
And so we are left only with the story and the lesson. A lesson that is written in the silence of the sea. The last echo faded into silence. For decades, the world held on to a fragile hope.
And so, on June 6, 2008, after a 5-year review found no credible evidence of a single surviving seal, it was the first, and so far only, seal species to be driven to extinction entirely by human causes. A tragic milestone. Its life was now summarized in a few lines of text. A tombstone of data for a creature that was once.
The declaration was merely a formality, a human-made echo of a much older and more profound sense.
And in the years since its disappearance, the reef itself has felt the loss. The delicate balance has been broken. The reef now lacks a key player. It is a kingdom without its gentle king. The ecological niche of a large and the ecosystem has adapted to its absence. It has found a new, different balance. And the empty reefs of the Caribbean send a powerful warning across the oceans. A warning, the ghost of the monk seal will haunt these reefs forever. A permanent reminder of what an ecosystem loses when it loses its king. But the story of the monk seals is not entirely over. 2 of the 3 ancient cousins still survive.
And the tragic story of their lost cousin is a powerful weapon in their fight for survival. The lessons learned from the Caribbean.
Great marine sanctuaries have been created. Vast protected areas where the surviving seals can live and breed.
And in the lab, a new kind of hope is emerging. Young scientists are studying the lost genes of the Caribbean seal.
This is the greatest legacy of the lost jewel of the Caribbean. A tragic story that has become a power. And the echoes of this loss have been felt across all the world's oceans. The story of the monk seal is part of a large.
We have learned that to save a species, we must first save its home. A great global.
And where we have chosen to protect, life has returned. A testament to the resilience of nature. And a new generation of guardians has answered the call, dedicated to ensuring that the mistakes of the past are never repeated. And so, from a great and silent tragedy, a new hope was born. The story of the lost jewel taught us a vital lesson. To save a species, we must first save its home. And where we have chosen to protect, life has returned. These sanctuaries are a living testament to the resilience, and this is the ultimate prize. A new generation, born into a world of safety, a future that... This is the legacy of the lost, a world of sanctuaries, a promise written in law and sticks. These are more than just lines on a map. They are a promise, backed by law and guarded by a new generation. And though the living creature is gone, a faint echo of its life remains, written in the language of genes.
And perhaps the keys to the future. By reading this ancient code, scientists can understand what made it unique.
And this knowledge is not just academic. It helps us to protect its surviving cousins, to understand their own genetic weaknesses.
And it holds a distant, almost impossible dream. That perhaps, one day, the science that allows us to distance. For now, its entire million-year history, its beauty, its gentleness, and its hope for the future, all rest. The story of the Caribbean monk seal is not just a history lesson. It is a mirror. The story of the monk seal's home is now the story of every reef on Earth. A choice.
And the choice is not just for governments or for scientists. It is for all of us, in the choices we make every day.
A future where the reefs are still vibrant, where the seas are still full of wonders. And
this is the final echo of the Caribbean monk seal. A silent plea, from a lost world, to the guardians of the new one.
The lost jewel of the Caribbean is gone. But its story is not just an ending. And there are people fighting for them. Scientists, volunteers, and citizens across the globe, working tirelessly to... Their future depends on us, on the choices we make, and the values we pass on to the next generation. We can choose a different path, one where we are not the cause of collapse, but the agents of restoration. So that no other species has to vanish into a legend.
The night of ignorance is over. A new dawn of awareness is breaking. And we have a powerful ally in this work. The profound resilience of nature itself. For instance, nature's resilience must be met with our own. A stubborn and defiant hope.
A new day has come for the ocean. A day of hope, of resilience.
The sea remembers. It remembers the silence of the lost, and it sings the song of the saved. The future of our oceans rests here, in the eyes of a new generation.
And we must tell them the stories of the ghosts, of the wonders that are no longer there.
To teach them that the beauty of their world is not guaranteed, that it is a precious gift, and that it is now their turn to be its guardian. This is the final and most important legacy of all. A story of loss that creates a new generation of guardians.
The sea remembers. It remembers the silence of the lost, and it sings the song.
And in the end, the future of our oceans rests here, in the eyes of a new generation.
And we must tell them the stories of the ghosts, of the wonders that are no longer there.
To teach them that the beauty of their world is not guaranteed, that it is a precious gift, and that it is now their turn to be its guardian. This is the final and most important legacy of all. A story of loss that creates a new generation of guardians.
And so, from a great and silent tragedy, a new hope was born.
Look at this creature one last time. The lost jewel of the Caribbean. It is gone forever.
It is a story of incredible beauty, of a gentle king, in a paradise of sun and water.
It is a story of a terrible warning, of how quickly that beauty can be erased by a world of greed and ignorance. But most of all, it is a story of hope. that a lesson learned from a great loss can inspire us to save what remains.